say. His name is NetsBoy. He thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Nets dog. Couldn't have said it better myself. What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest and your It's All Over Brooklyn Nets news. Man, oh man, that was heart-wrenching. A lot to talk about in this episode, a lot to discuss, a lot to complain about, and a lot to maybe reflect upon. So let's dive right in. There's a lot to digest with Game 7. A lot to digest. But instead of me going into this long rant about Game 7, I decided I'm going to do something a little bit more fun and different. Before I start, I would like to inform my viewers and subscribers and everyone who's watching this episode that this is probably going to be more of the more negative and a little bit more PG-ish, 13-ish type of episode. I usually try to keep things PG, and I'm going to still try, but if I slip up in my anger and I actually curse, then, you know, whatever, because, you know, there's a possibility that's going to happen. So, small viewer discretion advised. So, I decided that I was going to do something that I haven't done in the history of NetsBoy, but I used to do back in the day before I did NetsBoy. When I used to hang out among my friends, I used to do things called my top 3 donkeys of the game. And obviously, I'm not actually referring to them as the animal donkey as much as I'm, you know, referring them as the, well, the nickname of a donkey. And so, once again, staying on that PG type of, you know, going for that PG type of feel, I call them the top 3 donkeys of the game. And what the donkeys are the 3 players, or the 3 people, who are most responsible for the failure that I had witnessed. So I've done it in the past with the Nets, like I said, before NetsBoy. I've done it when I did Seton Hall basketball games, and I did it when with the Yankees, all my sports that I'm a fan of. I've always loved the idea of just blaming people, because that's what we do in society, don't we? When things don't go our way, we love to blame other people. We can't take ownership of it. We've got to blame others. And NetsBoy is no different than that. So here are my top 3 donkeys of Game 7 for the Brooklyn Nets. And, of course, I'll explain why they are their donkeys. So let's start with the number 3 donkey for the Brooklyn Nets. James, the 3-step Harden. Now, look, before I start bashing the guy, let's give him props for fighting through a hamstring injury, being out there, gutting it out, and trying to do everything he possibly can to be a factor to help this Nets team when he knew that he was needed, and he was certainly not 100%. We saw that. So I do give him props for gutting it out. But let me be clear with something. Just because you're out there does not mean you need to be so freaking stupid and throw the ball to everybody else, try these ridiculous half-court passes that get intercepted, and go 1 for 13 from, 2 of 13 from 3. Are you serious? You are clearly a shell of yourself. Why do you act like you can do these step-back threes over Giannis? You know what shooting requires? Your lower body. You know what a hamstring injury is? Your lower body. What it is, look, I get it. James Harden wanted to keep the defense honest. He didn't want to just be a liability. But why are you taking 13 threes? And you're only making 2 of them. And one of them was that ridiculous heave that went off the backboard. Luckiest shot in the world. And what got me even angrier is we saw towards the end of the game, or towards the middle of the game, James Harden was able to get them biting and go to the basket, and he hit a couple of those floaters. Why did he stop doing that? Was it hurting his hamstring? Was he afraid? Like, he was making those floaters. He should have stuck with it. Look, he had 22 points. He got fouled. I get it. He was hurt, but the plays he were making were just dumb. And I understand he was learning because how to, like, replay, but those turnovers were so costly. So costly. You know how many times the Nets had momentum and James Harden threw the ball to the other team? Or they had momentum and James Harden thought, it's my turn to be the superstar, even though I'm only about maybe 70% at best. Step back 3 over a 6'11" Giannis, and it was always short. I mean, this is what always drove me nuts about James Harden back when he was with the Rockets. Now, granted, once again, he was hurt, and I'm not going to forget about that. But it's the same type of mentality. He did not need to jack up 13 threes. 4 or 5 is all you needed to do to keep the defense honest and then put the ball on the floor. Maybe he was feeling better than he actually was, and he thought, hey, I can make these shots. But it just wasn't smart basketball. The whole thing with James Harden playing wasn't even that smart. I touched upon that in the last NetsBoy episode. And James, you just should have been better at understanding your limitations. You were out, like you had to keep the defense honest, I get it. But why are you taking so many dumb shots and why you keep turning the ball over? And I will say this, and I'm not going to blame Sean Marks because, you know, if you can get James Harden, you normally try to get James Harden. But I blame James Harden because he wanted to come to the Nets. Because let me tell you one thing. Imagine what this team would have looked like if they had Jared Allen as their center. Just want to throw that out there. No, we got to trade for James Harden. We got to trade for James Harden. Bye-bye Jared Allen. Bye-bye interior defense. Bye-bye interior presence. And what did we learn when James Harden got hurt in Game 1? That if you pair Kyrie up with the right type of situation with Durant, this Nets team could have thrived. When I look back at the James Harden trade now, I feel so much better that I poo-pooed it. Not because of how great James Harden looked, but because it dawned on me, what if Karis LeVert stayed with the Nets, granted the whole kidney thing aside, maybe later down the road, and he entered the James Harden role, right? Kyrie continued to play off the ball, but LeVert played on the ball as the lead guard. Does anyone else notice that that probably would have been almost as effective? Not as effective, because Karis LeVert is nowhere near James Harden's skill set. But it would have been pretty dang effective if LeVert was the main ball handler and Kyrie played off the ball, and then you still had Jared Allen to anchor the defense. Look, you can, hindsight's 20/20. You can reflect back at it, and it's certainly not the reason why the Nets lost. I just want to point out the fact that the Nets traded away the players that could have helped them in this series, in Jared Allen and even Karis LeVert, but especially Jared Allen, to bring in James the three-step Harden, who was hurt in the first 45 seconds of the series, was a shell of himself, and then came back and was just dumb, playing just dumb shots, taking dumb shots, making dumb passes. So glad we gave up all those draft picks and all those young players and all those players who would have helped us in the series for this useless piece of crap who doesn't seem to understand what he can and cannot do, even with limitations. So, James Harden, congratulations. You are my number 3 donkey. Donkey app. So there. Now, James Harden is just number 3 because, like I said, the guy was hurt. And I'm not going to forget that, and I do have a lot of respect for him. And let's be honest now, NetsBoy is extremely nitpicking here. We all know the James Harden trade is probably going to benefit the Nets, especially next season with a whole full season of James Harden with this team. It certainly made the Nets a better team. So I don't want to completely poo-poo it. I'm just pointing out the facts that it did not help the Nets at all in this series, and the players that the Nets lost in it certainly would have helped them in this series. So James Harden, with his stupidity and his dumb shots and his turnovers and the fact that he was on the Nets, he's my number 3 jackass. Oh, see? Told you it was going to slip up. Number 3 donkey. Sorry. My number 2 donkey. Your discretion advised. My number 2 donkey. This one's an obvious one. Joe Harris. Oh my God. Oh my God. I never seen a guy become so useless in the history of basketball. Going into this series, Joe Harris was Then he had an amazing Game 2. Remember Game 2? Lit it up. Couldn't miss the shot. He had 21 points in the first half. Everyone was going nuts. Joe Harris, here he is. The pride of the Brooklyn Nets. The only player out there who was from this original grit and grind team from 2 years ago. Because remember, Dinwiddie's hurt. And that's it. Everyone else who's on the Nets was not on this team 2 years ago. It's mind-boggling. So Joe Harris, the only remaining grit and grind net player. He's out there. He looks great. And then he's been complete garbage. And Game 7 was no different. 3 of 10 shooting. Only, what was he, 2 of 8 from 3 or something like that? I don't even remember what it is. And nothing was worse than that with like a minute 5 remaining. The Nets are up by 2. Kevin Durant goes to the basket. Gets blocked by Brook Lopez. Back to Bruce Brown. Kicks it out to Jeff Green. Passes it to a wide freaking open Joe Harris. A guy who shot 47% from 3. Wide open. This is a layup for this guy. And all I was thinking when he caught the ball and he was about to shoot it was, redemption, 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 redemption. Here it is. Everything will be forgiven, Joe. Just knock down the screen. The Nets will be up by 5 with a minute to go. Redemption, redemption. Clank. And we all know what happened after that. So, Joe Harris, you're the only remaining net from the grit and grind Nets, because Spencer Dinwiddie's going to be gone. Let's be honest now. Over the offseason, he's probably going to be gone. And other than that, it's just Joe Harris. You're the guy that us hardcore Net fans who loved this team when they first came to Brooklyn and all this stuff and saw them develop into a decent team before before they got this big 3. You're our guy. But that was complete donkey crap. So, Joe Harris, you are my number 2 donkey for being completely useless and missing wide open 3 down the stretch for a chance to help the Nets win. Joe Harris, number 2 donkey. Yeah. Now, before we go into our number 1 donkey, I do need to talk about the amazing shot by Kevin Durant. Obviously, let's have a little positivity now. Let's be a little bit happier, Nets boy. That was one hell of a shot by Kevin Durant. One of the greatest shots of all time, which probably made this loss hurt even more. Because the Nets were legitimately like an inch away, not even, maybe even a quarter inch away of Kevin Durant's foot behind the three-point line from winning that game. If Durant's foot is not on the line, that's a three-point shot, and the Nets are going to the Eastern Conference Finals. But nope, it was on the line, and Kevin Durant, I don't even know how he made that shot. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I legit was like, "Wah! Wah!" And I scared the crap out of Nets dog, and I just did it again. He's looking at me like, "What?" But it was the most incredible shot I've ever seen. And I thought it was a 3. Everyone thought it was a 3. And then they went back and they looked, and it confirmed it was a 2. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. But that was one amazing shot. And Kevin Durant, was incredible. It was incredible. You know, I talked about it in my last NetsBoy episode. I poo-pooed him a lot throughout the year. But we see why now Kevin Durant was one of the best. And we also see why now Steve Nash did those, load management. Because didn't Kevin Durant play like every minute of every game of 5 and 7? 6, he would have probably played every minute if the game was close, but he pulled him. Every minute of game 5 and every minute of game 7, Kevin Durant played. And I'm just like, you know what? That's obviously why they did the load management. So you know what? If it means that, and it means those type of performances by Durant, who had like 48 points, like, I'm all for the load management. But I just have to give the respect to that. And like I said, that's what made this loss just hurt so much more, was the fact that Durant made that amazing clutch shot with 1 second left to tie the game, and it was just that close from his foot being behind the line and being the game-winning shot. And so it was just heart-wrenching. So I do want to give my props to Kevin Durant. Of course, once again, we all know what happened after that. The Nets only scored 2 points in the overtime, which was highlighted by the great disaster of Joe Harris, as I just touched upon before. And, of course, the final shot by Kevin Durant, which was an air ball, which they said was a 3, but once again, it was a 2 again. And you know what? That last play in and of itself didn't make any sense, but I'll go into that in a second when I talk about my number 3 donkey. So just want to give some respect to Kevin Durant. He deserved it. He proved why he's a superstar. And just like the way I do want to give respect to James Harden for fighting through despite being a donkey, Kevin Durant, loads of respect, and so glad that he's here with the Nets for now. But so Kevin Durant, great job. It's a shame that that game-winning shot could not have been, or that shot could not have been the game-winning shot. So anyway, but now my number 1 donkey. Okay, here we go. This should be no surprise to anyone because I've been pretty much an advocate against this person for a while. I've always said a lot of negative things about him. I've always questioned a lot of things that he has said and the decisions that he's made. And yes, that is first-year coach Steve Nash. I've been very critical of him, and I think for good reason. Steve Nash, you are my number one donkey, and here's why. What the hell kind of game plan and rotation is 6.5 players? What kind of rotation is let's beat the crap out of Blake Griffin, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Bruce Brown, and even Joe, the useless Harris. Joe, the struggling all-series Harris. And let's keep guys like Landry Shamet, Jeff Green, who had 27 points in Game 5. Let's have him play only 13 minutes. 13 minutes! The guy that was 8 for 9 or 7 of 8 from 3 in Game 5 had 0 field goal attempts and didn't even do anything because he played 13 minutes. Jeff Green. Landry Shamet, who at this point would have been just as useful as Joe Harris. Give him a chance to get some opportunities and take some shots. He played 7 minutes. And no one else played! Look, I get it. You tighten your rotation in the playoffs. You want to have your best players out there. But there's players on the Nets bench that would have helped contribute significantly. Nick Claxton played 1 play. That last inbounds play that sent it to overtime. All right? Mike James, nowhere to be found. We just got to get a lot more frickin' James, the 3 steps, turn the ball over, dumb shots over Giannis Harden the whole time. No Tyler Johnson, who provides energy and toughness. Oh, and here's one, and here's the reason why, by the way, Jeff Green didn't play a lot. They didn't have an answer for Giannis, right? They didn't have an answer for Giannis, right? Giannis was going in. It was all Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin had to play the entire game almost because he had to compete with Giannis. He was the only physical body that the Nets have that could compete with Giannis, right? Wrong! Where was DeAndre Jordan? I talked about it last episode, and it doesn't make any sense. You literally have this guy on this team to be an interior defender, a physical body. Giannis is dominating. Giannis figured it out. He knew he could bully ball. Instead, you're playing Blake Griffin 50-something minutes and getting in foul trouble. And then your solution is to go small with Jeff Green, who should be playing the power forward and stretching the floor. Instead, he's collapsing inside. And now you're forcing Kevin Durant, who, by the way, was better as a help defender, having to guard Giannis one-on-one. It was so freaking dumb. The Nets had a player on their team who could have helped not stop Giannis, but slow him down. And I just don't get it. Literally, Giannis had 40 points. I guarantee you if DeAndre Jordan played just 10 minutes, Giannis would have ended up with 32. 4 of the shots that Giannis made probably wouldn't have gone in. That would have changed everything. DeAndre Jordan has been on this team since last year because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving wanted him here. I didn't want him. Not many Net fans wanted him, but he was here. And all year, we're like, all right, he shouldn't play too much, except when he goes up against bigger bodies, when the Nets go up against bigger, tougher guys in the interior. And what is Giannis but nothing but a really great interior player? And where was DeAndre Jordan? No. Where was Jeff Green? Only playing 13 minutes despite scoring 27 points later on. Where was the timeout at the end of overtime? With 13 seconds left, you get the stop, and you don't call a timeout? And the play that comes up is just Durant's step on the top of the key with Jrue Holiday, and he takes a ridiculous fadeaway shot? You could see there was no offensive flow there. You have to call a timeout. Their defense was set. The Bucks got their defense set. They got what they wanted. I understand Jrue Holiday's a shorter defender, but he was right up in Kevin Durant's grill. Call a timeout, set up a play, and go for the win. But no, like he does it. He lets Kevin Durant bring the ball up and try to do too much, like he always tries to do, doing too much, bro, and just completely waste the fact that he had a timeout left. Leaves Joe Harris out there playing 50-something minutes as well, not giving Shaman a chance, not giving Tyler Johnson a chance, seeing Joe Harris struggle. And once again, no DeAndre Jordan at all in the rotation. No Claxton in the rotation. Just a steady diet of Blake Griffin, who did very well, by the way. Blake Griffin did a phenomenal job. But once Blake Griffin got in foul trouble, that's when DeAndre Jordan should have played. That's true. As soon as Blake Griffin got in foul trouble, that is when DeAndre Jordan should have played. And it would have been the turning point of the series, of the game, to be honest. It would have been phenomenal, and it just should have happened. And the fact that it did it, and the other poor decisions by Steve Nash throughout the game, poor rotation, playing his players, playing his starters all game, getting them beat up and tired. So when they did make it to overtime, they had nothing left in the tank, because that was the idea. No, it's not. You could have figured something else out. Even if it was just like 2 minutes at the end of a quarter, you could have spelled Kevin Durant, put in Mike James, or Jeff Green, who scored 27, or Landry Shamet, other type of offensive players who could stretch the floor. Let Mike James dribble, penetrate, and kick out. Not rely on James Harden. There were so many better coaching decisions that you could have done, Steve. But no. You had to be stupid. You had to be a donkey. So congratulations, Steve Nash, on your Game 7 dumbass loss and being NetsBoy's #1 donkey of Game 7. I lost volume. You know, he gets more. You get another one. That's a donkey. One more. Those last few were very interesting donkey sounds. But congratulations, Steve. I hope you go into the offseason and think about what you've done. There you have it. Very, very disappointing. NetsBoy's top 3 donkeys. And look, if you look at the series objectively, and you look at everything objectively, and this is the reality, and this is what I had to do, because I had to sleep on this. When you look at the fact that James Harden got hurt in Game 1 with the hamstring, and the Nets were up 2-0, and then they lost 2-1, but they looked pretty sharp, and then Kyrie gets hurt in Game 4, and it was really just Kevin Durant and a bunch of okay players against Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, which, by the way, Brook Lopez looked fantastic in this series, and it kind of makes me feel a little good, because we all know Brook Lopez was one of my favorite Nets of all time, and he still is one of my favorite Nets, and still one of my favorite players. So that's the only kind of like silver lining, I guess, to all this, is that Brook Lopez played well and is now having a chance to compete for a championship. So good luck to you, Brook. But the Nets held their own. They had a miraculous performance by Kevin Durant in Game 5. They played tough, and they never gave up. They showed that grit and grind toughness throughout the series, and especially in Game 7. And look, I can yell all I want and say that Steve Nash made mistakes, and Jeff Green should have shot more, and Joe Harris was useless, and you know, James Harden should have been smarter, and all this stuff. I can complain all I want, but the reality is, objectively, the Nets never really had much of a chance. And the fact that they actually did fight hard and came within an inch of going to the Eastern Conference Finals, I have to objectively say, under the circumstances that presented itself, you can't be that upset. You really can't. If you would have told me going into the season that they would lose in the second round of the playoffs, or going into the playoffs that they would lose in the second round, it'd be a disappointment. But if you would have told me that they would have no Harden for most of the games and no Kyrie from Game 4 on, and I told you it would come down to this close of a shot in Game 7 for the Nets to go to the finals, Eastern Conference Finals, it's just the facts. So at the end of the day, NetsBoy does say to this Nets team, Kevin Durant in the game, congratulations on a hard-fought season. You guys did everything you possibly could. Even you, Joe Harris, who at least said the right things. I give tons of respect to Joe Harris, who said, I didn't play well. If I had played well, this outcome could have been completely different. And you know what? It probably would have. But you know what? You owned it. And I will say this. God have mercy on the league next year, because I have a bad feeling for them that Durant, Harden, Kyrie, even Joe Harris and probably even Steve Nash, who I hope has learned his lesson through what happened in this series. I have a feeling they're coming out for blood next year. So you all better watch out. That's the only positive I can really swing at this point. There you have it. Thank you all so much for sticking with me for my top 3 donkeys and some of my other ranting and complaining. Keep your eyes open for the next NetsBoy. It probably will be, well, probably a while from now. It'll be after the NBA Finals. So you're looking at probably not until, mid-July will I have another episode in which I'll talk about the whole season and some of the moves I feel like the Nets should make and all this stuff, off-season stuff. Got to discuss the draft and so on and so forth, even though the Nets don't, well, they have some draft picks, but it's really weird. So I will discuss that stuff later on. But overall, I just feel like I'm just going to take a break until then. There's no true end-of-the-season wrap-up video because this basically was it. The season was just disappointing when it ended. But like I said, when you look at the circumstances that presented itself, what can you do? So keep your eyes open to the next NetsBoy episode. Like I said, probably sometime in mid-July when we start talking about the off-season. And until next time, let me know what you guys think. If you agree about my donkeys, if there's anyone else that should be a donkey, about the whole Game 7, everything about it. Thank you all so much. And until next time, thank you, Brooklyn Nets, for giving it all you got. And this is NetsBoy signing off.